So this one is called Look Before You Leap, assessing the profitability of growing different crops or raising different livestock. And Chris talked about benchmarking, which is really appropriate for people who are already in the business, but this is a way of thinking about entering diversified vegetable production or starting an animal operation. I hope the formatting of these slides turns out okay. It looks a little funny. So the question is, how do you assess the economics of new crops or livestock? You need to think about the expected costs of growing or raising them. You need to think about the expected revenues. And then you also need to compare the expected costs and revenues with expected costs and revenues from what you're currently doing and what your outside options may be. As I believe Chris said, you may be thinking, well, I could either go into farming or I could invest in mutual funds. And so that's a legitimate outside option that you need to weigh as you're considering your farming operation, changing your operation or going into farming for the first time. So cost and return studies is the first of the two topics I'm going to talk about. This is essentially, these are reports done by extension services in various states. They provide case studies of the costs associated with starting a new type of crop or livestock operation. And they also, in addition to providing evidence on the costs, they provide evidence on the revenues. These are not too frequently updated and they're not geographically widespread. So I don't think I really said it as clearly as I wanted to in this other slide. Expectations are the key. We can never know what a guaranteed price is going to be. We can never know what the price of an input or an output is going to be. So we have to just manage our expectations and assess what we think is going to happen in the markets. And these tools may help us to make some determinations, but they're not going to be, it's not going to be like crystal clear from analyzing these types of reports what your costs and what your profits are going to be. So I am particularly partial to the cost and return studies put out by the University of California Extension Service, extension system. I did my graduate school at UC Davis, but they also happen to be the most complete and longest time series of cost and return studies available in the country. Some of them may be relevant for Connecticut growers, Connecticut farmers who are interested in certain crops, especially for example, this one, apples in the mountains on a 5-acre orchard. It's going to be a lot more similar to Connecticut than, say, growing grapes in Napa Valley or melons in the San Joaquin Valley or something like that. So I'll show you, for the sake, I know it doesn't show up well on the screen here, but I'll show you just so that you have a sense of what's going on with these cost and return studies, what they did with this apple orchard study. So they show the costs per acre for each of the first 5 years of operation, because you need to spend a lot of money planting the apple trees in the first year, doing some replacement in the second year. The costs look tremendously different from when you're harvesting in the third, fourth, and fifth year. And so they break down costs probably hundreds of different categories, from disking the soil, planting cover crops, planting trees, irrigation, pruning, et cetera. And they break it down by year. They also break it down by type of labor cost, type of input cost, including labor, fuel, materials, a number of hours it'll take for various tasks in the operation. And then they have monthly costs too. So this breaks it down for 1 year of the operation, what the costs are going to be by month. This is really good if you need to be planning your cash flow, showing each of those tasks and what it's going to cost you in each month of the year. As I said, they also have some other reports on the University of California Cooperative Extension website, UC Davis website, showing sample costs to establish a vineyard and produce wine grapes. So just so you know, these are PDFs. They're not interactive spreadsheets, but That's done intentionally because they want you to see what a reasonable example for one farm is, and for you to not change parameters too much, because if you're changing parameters thinking, well, this applies to my operation, but this one doesn't apply to my operation, well, if you decrease your labor costs, you may need to increase your machinery costs. And the people who are running this UC cost and return study, they just made it their philosophy. We're not going to let the users play around with the spreadsheets and make incorrect assumptions about the relationship between labor costs and machinery costs, or playing around with the spacing of the vines in the vineyard, things like that. They just presented one realistic snapshot of what costs are going to be. But other cooperative extension services have done spreadsheets that you can play with easily and play around with different costs. I think the best one is probably Penn State's. So they have 23 crop studies and 23 animal studies with interactive spreadsheets. Cornell has some. I thought Cornell had more, but when I went to prepare this presentation, all I could find was 8 crops, high tunnel production budgets from 2009, so it's a little bit outdated. And UMass also has at least 11 studies for crops. And obviously Iowa State and other people in other parts of the country have their own studies of varying quality also, but these are more regionally specific for us. So I'm hoping, part of the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because I'm hoping to develop more cost and return studies for Connecticut. So I'm hoping to identify which crops and livestock to use for case studies during next year, and do a first wave of data collection and interviews with growers in various industries later next year, hoping to put out our first reports on the web by 2019. And it's kind of, I mean, I'm the only faculty member in the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics who is likely to be heavily involved with this. So I am a bit limited in terms of my resources, and I'm going to need to rely on student assistants to do a lot of the heavy work here, especially the surveys. But so that's why it's a little bit slow. Another topic is finding out current information on prices. So the cost and return studies give you a very general sense of what the revenues might be, but as you know, prices change all the time, and information from Cornell in 2009 isn't likely to be relevant at all today. So the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service provides market news reports, as well as a program in collaboration with the Vermont government that I'll talk about for a minute at the end of the talk. The market news reports are designed to give buyers and sellers information on current market conditions. So this is the home screen for the specialty crops portion of the market news portal, which is a little bit different from the feed grains and beef and meat livestock portion. So you can get reports on current prices being paid for various fruits and vegetables, herbs, nuts, ornamentals, and honey. That's what USDA means when they say specialty crops. You can get reports by commodity and also by location, or what location or what stage of the supply chain the prices are representative of. Actually, a lot of these are only for quantities, which are useful for other reasons. They're interesting to economists, but definitely not as much to farmers. So there are 2 reports that are potentially useful for farmers. One is the shipping point data, and the other is the terminal market data. And these are the ones that may be potentially useful for farmers because they're the 2 that have information on prices. And I know that, I'm sorry about the formatting of this PDF. I'm not sure what went wrong when I made the slideshow, but hopefully you can see that now. So the shipping point data set shows the prices for which specialty crops were traded at points of entry, ports, and various other prominent locations in the country. It has data from 36 different states, not from Connecticut or Rhode Island, but from some of our neighbors. And this may be advantageous because it shows prices that are more in line with farm gate prices than terminal market, which is further downstream down the supply chain. The terminal market prices show the prices that are being paid for specialty crops at 12 or 13 different terminal markets, including Hunts Point Market in the Bronx. So these are wholesale markets, and this is again, it's not necessarily the price you're going to be receiving for your fruits and vegetables, but it shows you trends and it allows you to see, well, what's the price for Gala apples relative to Honeycrisp apples or Macintosh apples. And so this is what one of the reports from the Shipping Point market the Shipping Point market news data looks like. And again, kind of have to zoom in to see it better. But these are prices paid for New York apples last week in New York. So I think on the right side of the screen, it says these are Gala apples. It shows the different sizes and what type of package it's in. And specialists, people who are really in the know, would know how many pounds of apples this is. But this is, and this one in particular, it does specify, so it's 12 3-pound cartons for 36 pounds of apples. At the shipping point, the seller's getting paid between $21 and $26 last week for these Gala apples. And so again, this may give you a sense of what's going on right now in the market and allow you to compare different varieties of apples or different types of fruits and vegetable crops. And it does tell you high and low prices. Sometimes it says mostly high and mostly low. So again, it gives you a real, it really narrows it down to grade of apples, Washington extra fancy. So this is all really similar stuff with the New York terminal market, the Hunts Point market. The market news data for livestock, poultry, and grain, as I said, it's a bit different. It's not in the same format. And I don't think it's going to be as useful for long-term business planning because, well, for one, the data is just not as it's just not as usable. It's not as user-friendly. And for another, I think there's a lot more stuff that's going on in those international markets for livestock, poultry, and grain. So what I recommend is looking at the USDA Economic Research Service, again, my former employer, their monthly report that's called Livestock, Dairy, and Poultry Outlook. So this will tell you what they expect is going to happen to prices for the rest of the year into next year for these markets. And they focus a lot on trade, analyzing past trends, and also looking toward the future. So that's a resource that I would look into if you're thinking about expanding a herd or adding a different type of livestock. Lastly, this is probably particularly important for Connecticut, although unfortunately it's Vermont, it's not Connecticut. This is a survey that's done by the Vermont Agency of Agriculture in collaboration with the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. So this is a survey of farmers markets showing high, low, and average prices for organic and non-organic. Oh shoot, I don't have the link there. Yeah, so I wonder if I can type it in. The PDF doesn't have the link. Yeah, so here's a farmers market report this is a survey of farmers markets in Vermont at the beginning of August. And they show again, similar to what AMS does with market news, they show high, low, and average prices for organic and non-organic vegetables, and at the bottom of the screen for proteins. So this would be great if you were diversified farms selling at farmers markets in Vermont. But it's only going to give you an idea of the relative prices of goods in in Connecticut, because this is definitely not going to be the same exact price you're going to see in Connecticut.
What about our weekly report? Don't they have fruits and vegetables in Connecticut?
Do they?
Yeah, the Connecticut Department of Ag has a a newsletter.
Oh, that's
for the
right.
weekly
That's
that
right.
Also has some prices on it.
Yep. Thank you both.
Aren't the prices on that report coming from Boston?
I was just wondering where they were coming.
I don't know.
I think they come from Boston.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
they have Boston and Hartford.
Oh, they
Oh,
have,
yes,
they
Hartford.
come from Hartford there too?
I was thinking
Okay.
it was Connecticut in there.
Yeah,
I know the livestock is coming from elsewhere.
right.
Oh, they have
No, they have prices for Middlesex.
Middlesex is in there for livestock.
Right. So thank you for that reminder. I
We
had,
don't care about Vermont.
well, well, tell you what, I mean, this is a problem because obviously I know people at the Department of Agriculture here. I'm not on the mailing list. I knew about this report, but I never took the time to sign up. And the communication is a problem here. I can't Google it. I can't, nobody put me on the mailing list.
Mailing list, I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm not blaming you, Joyce, but
I know, but I'm going, shoot. Let me write a note.
so,
It's my fault.
no, so,
I know that it was a really good reference that we used when I was selling vegetables for somebody else a
Yeah.
few years ago. And going to the regional market in Hartford, I knew approximately how much a box of apples that I was selling was costing
right,
on the local market, you know, what to sell it for and what not to go below.
sure. Great. Okay, so I will make sure to add that reference to this presentation. Thank you all. I guess that's it. So thank you for your attention, and thank you all for coming out. I hope this was informative to you, and I learned something just now. That's important. Thanks.